when you first brought up this concept, I was a little bit mind blown.
Learning how to be present in the moment and just take a chill pill for a second has been so hard.
How can I excel at work while also like growing our podcast, while also making sure I spend time with my family and Barry and my friends?
What is always on the back burner though is like the me time. So we've been thinking about today's episode for a while now.
Yes.
And it's about balancing like 3 areas of your life that are really important to you that are happening right now, and how we feel like you can never really focus on 3 at the same time, and you have to almost cut one off to be able to focus on the 2 areas that you really want the most. So this kind of reminded me about this economic term that we use, and it's called the impossible trinity. So today we're going to talk about our impossible triangles. But first, hi, my name is Janice.
My name is Emily.
And this is 4 Years Later, where
we talk about the unglamorous parts about being in our mid-20s as Asian American women, all 4 years after college.
Okay, so if you're a little bit of a nerd, or you're just curious what the heck is an impossible trinity, I'm going to tell you. I'm pulling it up on my phone. Okay, so the impossible trinity refers to the trade-off a government faces when deciding international monetary policy. This is from Investopedia. And it balances 3 things: free flow of capital, independent monetary policy, and fixed exchange rates. So it's basically when a government can only pick 2 of the 3 things I just mentioned, and not all 3 at once, or else like it's just actually impossible. So it's almost mutually exclusive. And I started thinking about this concept back in December when I thought I had reached this perfect equilibrium of my life where I was balancing dating, my career, and my relationships with my friends and family. And then the news with Kanye happened, and that actually affected my career. So much so to a point where I was so worried about my career that at the time when I was dating this one person, I decided I could no longer give him the time and energy anymore, and I had to completely cut it off. And it made me feel like, oh my gosh, why can't I balance all these things in my life? But it also made me realize maybe I really can't. Like maybe even if I want all these 3 things in my life, I'm always going to have to pick 2 of the 3.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like when you first brought up this concept, I was a little bit mind blown because I was like, wait, this is exactly what I'm struggling with right now. And I feel like maybe a lot of people could relate to it. Like maybe it's not just narrowing down the 3 things that you're focusing on, but there's like 5, 6, 7, 10 things that you're like trying to simultaneously maintain all at the same time. And it's like impossible to do. But so even just like for this sake of this exercise, like picking 3 things that like we're both trying to balance was really hard.
It's really hard because it's also always changing. Like
yes,
you're adding, you're also taking away, but then like the three things that you're focused on, or the 10 or the 5, whatever it is, it all depends on what you're going through in your life and the phases.
Yeah.
Like back then when we were planning this episode, mine was dating, work, and relationships. But now, obviously not work, but the pod, and just my career, I guess, in general. So I guess grad school, relationships, and my hobbies. Those are the 3 things that I'm focused on balancing. And I feel like I don't have enough time and bandwidth to focus on those things.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like this is such a mid-20s post-college problem to have because while you're in college, your schedule is just completely dictated already. Like you know everything that you're supposed to be doing. I don't know, maybe in the moment I wouldn't have said that, but now looking back, it seems like there was always a time to do and get everything done. Whereas now, like with so much more independence comes more responsibility and like trying to plan out your life is like so much harder, it seems.
Yeah, I agree, but I also think in college, like you have a direction, right? You have a plan. You have a major, and then you have all these classes that you need to take in order to graduate.
Yeah.
And so that plans out all your time, how you're going to study, when your classes are, when your finals, your midterms, your projects. And once you graduate, your time has to be managed by you only. And there's no one holding you accountable besides yourself.
Yeah.
And you know that feeling when like you get back from work and in the morning you're like, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to make a full-on healthy meal. But then you come back and you're so tired and your brain's like, screw the gym.
Yeah.
Let's just DoorDash.
Yeah.
That happens when you graduate, where there's no plan and it's so scary because you can change it every single day. And I think you don't have a focus as much anymore, that maybe that's why we feel like it's impossible,
Yeah, that's true.
because you're always dropping something to focus on something else. But like, I guess for me, my impossible triangle now, and it was hard to pick three things. My impossible triangle was my career, now my hobbies, and then my relationships with my friends and my family. When I'm focused on applying to grad school and I consider that as part of my career, you saw me. I had no time for my hobbies like the podcast. And it was really hard to balance like the podcast, applying to grad schools, spending time with my friends, and making sure I'm a good friend for them. That what I ended up sacrificing was my hobby, right? Because you know, when this whole unemployment thing happened and I thought, I'm going to have so much time. I don't know what to do with myself. I was like, I'm going to pick back up my art. I want to learn how to DJ. I'm going to start graphic designing for the podcast. But that just went on the back burner as soon as I realized that applying to grad schools took up all of my time and making sure that I still give attention to my friends. But it is so much, I think, in our lives, like prioritizing is so hard and it's so uncomfortable and shitty. And because we always want to move ourselves forward, when we have to drop something,
it feels like you failed.
Yeah, or that you're actually stagnant.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I feel like I think about this all the time and I wish I had a solution for how to not feel this way other than like just not doing so many things all the time, which I don't think is a solution that we're both looking for.
No.
Because I'm always like thinking, okay, how can I excel at work while also like growing our podcast, while also making sure I spend time with my family and Barry and my friends. And like, I feel like those are probably my three things: hobbies, work, and family and friends. Well, I guess family and friends are two things, but
I think they're the same.
they're the same.
Friends. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Like trying to like make sure that I am doing a good job at work for me now means going to the office every day and staying all day. But then by staying all day, I get home really late. So I don't get to see Barry as long as I normally would if I worked from home. And then if I'm like doing really focusing on the podcast and we're working on it all weekend long, and then I don't get to like make time, make sure I go see my Nana for lunch, or like it just gets really crazy. So I don't know what the solution is. Like for now, I think I've just been trying to tell myself you're not a superhero. You can't just like jet set to like tend to everything in your life all the time. Like there's always going to be things that you're not going to be 100% present for. And just like, it's like, okay, if I'm really focusing on work and the podcast this weekend, the next weekend I'll pivot so that, like
Ooh,
it's
yeah.
like work and family, and then you pivot again, and then it's family and pod and not work. And like, I feel like even your impossible triangle can change by the week, right? Like I just put an offer on a house, and now part of my impossible triangle is probably going to be kicking out someone or something and being replaced with my house stuff for a few weeks or a few months.
Yeah. Wait, now that you say that, I feel like your impossible triangle can even change in a day, where you have to cancel on friends because you suddenly something came up.
Yeah.
And so much of your mid-20s is probably about not only prioritizing, but like learning how to be okay with losing something or someone, to make space for something else. But I think that's a good point. Like sometimes if you can't focus on your friends this week, then you do that next week. And learning to give yourself time and space to do that.
But also, like, if you just because you're not giving your friends or your family or whatever it is time in that moment doesn't mean that you've given up on them. Just means that, like, you'll get back to it. Or I guess, like, you have to remind yourself you're going to get back to it. Because I think this is something we've talked about before when it came to, like, prioritizing your grad school apps versus the podcast, where you were saying, if I'm putting everything into my grad school apps, I'm not putting anything into the podcast. And vice versa. And I was telling Janice, like, just because you're paying attention to the podcast doesn't mean you don't care about anything else. It just means it's what you're focusing on in that moment. And you can't get to the podcast, you can't get to the next thing that you want to focus on without solving the immediate problem first. Otherwise, you're just going to have multiple problems that are like half solved. And then you're stuck even more. You're just in this like limbo period. But sometimes you have to put all of your energy into some things so that you can move on to the next thing.
I think you're right. And that's something I have to learn how to do versus letting everything go on fire at the same time.
We're always going to have a fire. Just make sure it's like a controlled fire, maybe in like one section of your triangle.
Yeah, no, you're right. Because you know what? Like, so when I'm hanging out with a friend or when I'm doing podcast stuff, I sometimes am like, oh, but I also should be learning how to DJ. Like my mind just goes,
What am I not doing right?
yeah. Or if, for example, if you're hanging out with a friend, but you guys are just like sitting on the couch together, right? And you're scrolling your phone on your phone. In my head, I would probably, after 30 minutes, be like, I need to go home so that I can practice how to DJ, or else I'm wasting time. And then everything in my life that I do, I become a nervous, stressful wreck, where I'm just like, I could have been here doing this. And if I'm not, then I'm wasting my life away. I'm not being productive. And who knows when I'll have this time. And learning how to be present in the moment and just take a chill pill for a second has been so hard, because I feel like if I'm not working, then I'm not helping myself.
Yeah. And this reminds me a lot of like something that you were telling me to do like a couple weeks ago. And I was like really struggling with work and just feeling inadequate in all areas of my job. And you told me, okay, well, why don't you think about something that you're really good at? And I was like thinking about something I was really good at. And then you said like, sometimes you have to exercise the muscle of something good instead of always focusing on like what you're like not good at. Because like especially when you grow up in an Asian household, it's like, why are we going to spend time on something we already know we can do when we can better ourselves on something that we're not as good at? And I feel like it kind of reminds me of this impossible triangle thing, how you're saying when you're home when you're hanging out with your friends, you're always thinking about what am I not doing right now instead of like being like, okay, like this is something that's important to me. You're important to me. And so the fact that we're hanging out, like I want to be in this moment. But we can't do that because we're like hardwired as Asian daughters to be, okay, like what can I improve next?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And reminding ourselves of like how we're feeling now and what area in our life this is fulfilling.
Yeah.
So I guess it's like choosing activities with your time that you know will fulfill you in some way, and then reminding yourself throughout
Yeah.
why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. It's solving something. Like if you're doing it, I guess, what's the word? Like you're forgetting, like you spent so much time worrying about not being able to do the thing that you're doing in this moment.
Yeah.
Because you're so busy focusing on the next.
But okay, this I understand what you're saying, but this kind of reminds me of I know what you're saying and I understand it, but at the same time, what's interesting is like even with the three triangle or the three areas, and even if we pick two, we're still always doing something, and for like not always for someone else, but it doesn't feel like we have any time to ourselves. We're focused on work and we're like, okay, we're going to give this our all because it's going to benefit our future, our career. Oh, we're going to focus on our friends because it'll benefit our social lives, whatever. What is always on the back burner though is like the me time, I think, where I don't give myself permission to sit on the couch and just do nothing. And if I do that, which I do, I feel bad about it, right? And in my head, I'm beating myself up.
Yeah. It's hard to pencil yourself in when you have I think the hobbies part is supposed to be like our designated me time, even though it's not me time because we're so stressed out and like it's work tending to those hobbies. But in the perfect world, yeah, I feel like we would dedicate like at least an hour or more to just veg out or to like meditate or do yoga or something that's like for you, but
I think now realizing that the impossible triangle, like I know that you face it, and everybody probably faces it in their own way. Maybe it's not three things, but one way I've started to learn ever since COVID actually is asking for help. It's so growing up, like you're taught to do everything by yourself, right? Even I think as the eldest, your parents, you're your parents' first kid. You are the first kid of a bunch of other kids. You have to lead the way, but you don't even know where you're going. And you have to be the one to figure it out and teach everybody else. And especially something maybe in a place or a culture that I was not familiar with, like me applying for US schools in Asia, I was the first one of my family to do that.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of figure that out by myself, but I didn't even know what I didn't know. All of that is just to say, as the eldest, you have the sense of responsibility to basically create a path, right? And I've done so much of everything in my life almost by myself that I struggle to ask for help. And so when everything is on fire or I feel like I need to drop one thing for the other two things, I used to feel really sucked into that. Like, I'm a failure. This is way too difficult. Like, I can't do any of this. It's just so overwhelming to a point I don't want to even try any of the three. Now, the way that I kind of ask for help is like if my siblings needed advice and I wasn't able to do that for them, I would always sacrifice like all the other arms of the triangle to help them. But now I'm like, can you ask dad? Can you ask mom? Or like, can you ask your friend? Or I will sacrifice an hour of my free time and consider it an investment to teach them the process of how I would approach their situation and give them tools so that in the future they can apply those and not need me. So I'm technically saving myself time down the road.
Right. That's cool.
What do you think happens to you now when you can't like balance things in your life?
Crying, a lot of crying, a lot of being frustrated for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then picking myself up and being like, okay, like what can I do in my control right now? Like what tangible thing can I make a plan for? And I make the plan and I execute the plan. And like I try to remind myself like whatever has happened is in the past and there's nothing I can do to change it. So how can I like put my next foot forward?
Do you ever worry about like losing the things that you have in your life right now when you drop one of the things in your impossible triangle?
Oh,
like your
yeah.
friends?
All the time. I always think about like, well, like we only have so much time on this planet. Like how am I going to make up for not seeing my Nana this weekend, or like not putting as much time into my jewelry business, or like whatever it is. Like I'm always like thinking about, am I going to regret this?
Yeah, like how is that decision going to affect your entire future?
I think about it a lot, and then I realize there's really not much I can do because I've already decided to put my energy in to whatever it is I had decided. And that I have to remember like, okay, putting in more hours at work this week, but next week I'll make sure that I put in a couple more hours into jewelry or into my Airbnb or whatever it is. Like I have to like reallocate.
What happens if you feel like the thing that you're dropping now might not be there the week after?
Give me an example.
Like this one is the one I always think about. It's so sad. But when like my grandparents, they live in Taiwan. I see them maybe once a year. If I'm working, I have to take time off to fly there.
Yeah.
During COVID, it was like bad. I couldn't do all that. And then I worry like that dropping that leg of the triangle isn't good because there's limited time with them.
Right. Yeah.
And that is something I can't get over.
Yeah.
Like I always think about that because like you really don't know
Yeah.
when is the last time.
Yeah. Totally. I think the best you can do is like, I don't know, very list oriented. If you can just make a plan to see them, and then also like you call them a lot, or maybe you set a routine to call them. Like I call them every Thursday night or whatever. It might ease your mind to know that there's like, kind of like we talked about, like having these like weekly or like whatever monthly meetings like helps maintain your relationships better.
Yeah. It all just takes work.
I think it sucks too with grandparents because with your friends, you can easily text them
what
or
I'm saying,
send a
yeah.
message on Instagram.
You're not like they're gonna move away next week.
Yeah.
And if you know that, you'd be like, okay, I'm just gonna hang out with them all this week. Like they tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. With your grandparents specifically, like if you never contacted them, like that would be a really bad problem.
Yeah.
But you do talk to them and you do make some time. It's just that like you're worried that it's not enough. And it's never going to be enough. Like you're never going to spend enough time with your family. Like
I just moved
no
back.
one does. Even if you moved back, like my Nana lives 20 minutes away from me.
True.
Right? Like
Yeah.
there's never going to be enough time to like spend with people you love.
Yeah.
So I think acknowledging that and like reminding yourself of that and then making your plan.
Even not just like talking about our grandparents, but about the podcast, like the conversation that we had. It doesn't like that also seems fleeting kind of, right? Like every week we need to do an episode or else we are not in the conversation or we don't feel relevant or we lose followers and listeners and people that supported us. So that always feels like that's something that we can never put on the back burner.
Yeah.
And when we do, we get so stressed out about it.
Yeah.
And I think the one way that we've recently discovered is setting up like a weekly. But in the past, like the way that we always make sure we commit to it is by almost setting yourself up for success in terms of like a calendar or how much we want to film a certain day, because we can foresee certain things, and then being able to be like, this is not this is not our like source of income. It's not even an income source. So we just need to have fun with it. And if we miss an episode or two,
it's not like we failed.
Yeah.
We're just doing the best we can. And at least we did film this time or whatever.
Yeah. And a friend recently Kat reminded me, she was like, you guys feel like you're not doing enough for the podcast, but from the outside, everybody's like, they're doing good.
Yeah.
They're maintaining it. They're committing to it, you know?
Yeah, that's true. Or the fact that we even have one, people are like, I don't even have. It's like, okay, it's good to have the outside perspective because we're always going to put ourselves down.
Yeah.
It's nice she said that.
She's a fan.
She's a fan. Anyways, I don't even know if we're still talking about the impossible
I was
triangle.
thinking about that halfway through. I was like,
oh, we
so
lost
scattered.
it. Yeah, but hopefully this conversation helped.
I think it's about balancing like all of your overthinking.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good way to sum it up. We're always going to be overthinking. Like, how can we start giving ourselves a little more grace? See you in the next one.